You're having a wonderful picnic with a lemonade in your hand, and suddenly you spot one hovering near your food. That low, threatening drone is instantly recognizable. It seems to be specifically attracted to your drink, of all things. Wasps. Now, here's the interesting thing though. The moment you go to swat the wasp, it releases a chemical signal, an alarm pheromone that spreads throughout the air in seconds. And every wasp in that range gets the same message: threat detected, gather. Now 1 becomes 3, 3 becomes 7, and all of a sudden it becomes unmanageable. What started as a simple nuisance now turns into something that sends people running away. Here's the thing. There's almost no insect on the planet more universally despised than wasps. Sure, bees sting too, but people accept them as necessary. They make honey. They have a reputation to protect. Wasps make nothing. They arrive uninvited at every outdoor meal. They seem to be built entirely for causing problems. They can sting multiple times without dying, which nobody asked for, and late in summer they get erratic and desperate and seem to attack for no reason, which is terrifying in a way that the steady, purposeful bee never quite manages. There's also something specific about the sensation of a wasp sting that sits differently in the memory than a bee sting. A honeybee sting is sharp and immediate, and then it's over. The bee leaves its stinger and flies away, and you spend the next few minutes dealing with the aftermath. A wasp sting is repeated. The same animal can sting you 5, 8, 10 times in rapid succession, and each sting lands the same way. That mechanical persistence, the wasp not dying, not retreating, not having any disincentive to stop, creates a specific and lasting impression. People remember being stung by a wasp in a way that shapes their relationship with the entire insect category for years afterward. And then there's the late summer behavior, the wasps that orbit every outdoor gathering from August onward, the ones that crawl into open drink cans and seem completely reckless about where they go. People describe them as drunk. They are not drunk. What's actually happening to them is more interesting and more tragic than that, and understanding it changes what you're looking at entirely. The hatred of wasps is so widespread that a team of researchers at University College London actually set out to study it. Their survey found that wasps consistently receive the lowest public regard of any pollinating insect despite doing ecological work comparable to bees. The researchers described the problem directly. Wasps are one of those insects we love to hate. Their 2021 review paper in Biological Reviews, which compiled evidence from over 500 academic studies, argued that this hatred is almost entirely rooted in something the same researchers had documented in a previous study: widespread ignorance about what wasps actually do. Now, hate is a strong word, but when you see what wasps are doing in your garden and what they were doing in your field before that, and what peptides in their venom are currently being studied in cancer laboratories, the word starts to feel accurate. But we're getting ahead of the story. Let's start with what you actually do when wasps show up. The first and most important thing anyone should know about a wasp encounter is this: do not swat. This isn't just advice about staying calm. There's a specific biological reason for it. When a wasp is struck, it releases an alarm pheromone. This chemical signal travels fast, and it reaches other workers in the colony almost immediately. What the pheromone communicates is essentially a call to defense, and the response is rapid. Within seconds of a disturbed or killed wasp releasing this signal, other workers within range are actively mobilizing. The wasp you hit with your hand or your newspaper hasn't made things safer, it's made things worse. The same applies to swatting near a nest entrance. The wasps coming and going from a nest are constantly carrying chemical information back and forth. Disruption at the entrance triggers a colony-wide defensive response that a calm observer standing the same distance away would never encounter. When a wasp approaches you or hovers near your food, move away from it slowly. Not a panicked retreat, a calm lateral step away from whatever is attracting it. Wasps that are foraging, which is what most of the ones you encounter away from a nest are doing, are not looking for a confrontation. They are looking for sugar or protein, and if you don't have what they want or you aren't blocking access to what they want, they will move on. The wasp hovering near your drink is interested in your drink, not in you personally. The second thing to do is to identify what species you're actually dealing with, because the behavior of different wasp species varies enormously. and most of the fear people carry is based on one specific species being blamed for the behavior of all of them. Yellow jackets are the primary source of most negative wasp experiences. They are the ones that show up at picnics and trash cans, the ones that nest in the ground and will defend aggressively if anyone steps near, the ones that become erratic and frantic in late summer. Their aggression is real and well documented. But yellow jackets are one of roughly 30,000 species of stinging wasp, and their territorial confrontational behavior is not representative of the group. Paper wasps, the ones most commonly found building small, umbrella-shaped open nests under eaves and deck railings across North America, are meaningfully different. They will sting if the nest is directly threatened, but they don't patrol territory, they don't mob intruders, and they will not follow you away from the nest if you back off slowly. A paper wasp going about its foraging work in your garden is one of the most docile insects in your yard. Multiple pest control and university entomology resources describe paper wasps specifically as not dangerous under normal circumstances and non-aggressive unless provoked. The fear most people feel when they see a wasp near their roses is almost always triggered by an animal that has no intention of stinging them. The identification difference between the two is learnable with a few minutes of attention. Paper wasps tend to be longer and thinner than yellow jackets, with longer dangling legs visible when they fly. Their nests are open-celled with no paper envelope around them. You can see directly into each individual cell from the outside. Yellow jacket nests, whether in the ground or in wall voids or hanging from trees, are enclosed in a papery outer covering that hides the cells inside. Bald-faced hornets, a third species commonly confused with yellow jackets due to their black and white markings and large enclosed nests, are more defensive than paper wasps, but typically only aggressive within a few feet of the nest. Unlike yellow jackets, they don't forage around food at picnics. The large gray football-shaped nest hanging in your tree is not a yellow jacket nest, and the animal building it is not the same one diving at your drink. The third thing. Understand the season you're in. This changes everything about wasp behavior, and it's the piece of information that explains why summer wasps and autumn wasps feel like completely different animals. We'll get to exactly why in a moment. Fourth, if you have a nest that needs to come down, do it at night. Wasp vision is poor in low light conditions. Workers that are out foraging during the day have returned to the nest by dusk. The colony is at its least active, and any treatment on whether you choose a foam insecticide applied directly to the nest entrance or any other method will reach the maximum number of workers rather than leaving the foraging population to return and rebuild. Now, there's a fifth thing, and it's the one that determines whether the wasp nest near your garden stays or goes. And the answer is going to depend on something most people have never thought about before. But before I get there, you need to understand what a wasp actually is, because what's flying around your picnic table is not what most people think it is. And the thing it was doing in your garden before it found your food is something that a $416 billion industry is only just starting to put a proper number on. Here's the thing most people don't realize. The fear and the dismissal are costing us something. When a group of researchers at UCL set out to quantify what wasps are worth, not in emotional terms but in straight economic terms, the number they arrived at was not a small one, and the number barely captures the half of it that actually intersects with your garden. Let's start with the insect itself. They have been on this planet for at least 130 million years, predating the rise of flowering plants, predating modern birds, predating every crop that human agriculture has ever depended on. They are divided broadly into two groups based on social organization. Solitary wasps nest alone, raising individual young in mud cells or underground burrows. Social wasps, yellow jackets, paper wasps, hornets, and their relatives build communal nests, raise workers cooperatively, and operate with a division of labor that makes them one of the more sophisticated insect societies in the natural world. The nest itself is worth a moment. A paper wasp or yellow jacket nest is made from wood pulp. Workers chew raw wood fiber from fence posts, dead trees, cardboard, mix it with their saliva, and apply it in thin layers that dry into sheets of natural paper. The hexagonal cell structure is an engineering achievement that distributes structural stress so efficiently that architects and material scientists have studied it for building design. The wasp didn't need blueprints. The geometry was solved by evolution over 100 million years. long before any human engineer came to the same conclusion. The nest begins in spring with a single queen working alone. She chews the wood, forms the first cells, lays the first eggs, hunts the first caterpillars to feed the larvae that hatch. When those larvae develop into the first generation of workers, they take over the construction and hunting while the queen focuses on laying. By midsummer, the nest may hold hundreds of cells. By late summer, depending on conditions and species, the colony can reach 4,000 to 5,000 workers, and the nest may have expanded to the size of a basketball or larger, containing 10,000 to 15,000 individual cells. All of it built without instructions, without tools, and without ever having seen another nest. Inside that nest, through most of spring and summer, the colony operates as a protein processing factory. The queen lays eggs. Workers hatch as larvae. Those larvae need protein to develop, and to feed them, the adult workers go out and hunt. They are catching flies, hunting caterpillars, killing aphids and beetles and grubs and every other soft-bodied insect they can find. They chew this material into a protein paste and bring it back to feed the young. A yellow jacket colony at peak population is collecting enormous quantities of pest insects every single day to feed that nursery. The adults themselves eat differently. They drink. They're attracted to sugars, flower nectar, fruit juice, honeydew from aphids, the liquid secreted by their own larvae in exchange for the protein the workers bring. This is why adult wasps visit flowers and why they are pollinators. The 2021 review by researchers at UCL and the University of East Anglia found documented evidence of wasps visiting 960 plant species. Among those, 164 species are completely dependent on wasps for pollination and would not reproduce without them. Some of these are orchid species that have evolved physical structures specifically designed to attract wasps, shapes that mimic a female wasp's body, luring male wasps in to transfer pollen while attempting to mate with the flower. The most famous of the wasp-pollinated plants is the fig. Every variety of fig fruit in the world, the figs in your refrigerator, the ones in fig jam, the ones on restaurant menus, was pollinated by a wasp. Not by a bee, by a tiny, highly specialized fig wasp that enters the unripe fig through a narrow opening at the base, lays its eggs inside, pollinates the flowers while moving through the fruit's interior, and dies inside. What you eat when you eat a fig has been processed by wasps. The fig tree and the fig wasp co-evolved so completely over millions of years that neither can reproduce without the other. Remove the wasp, and the fig tree stops producing fruit. It is one of the most documented examples of species interdependence in plant biology, and it involves the insect people most want to eliminate from their outdoor spaces. The solitary wasps are worth a separate mention because they represent the vast majority of wasp species and are among the most misunderstood. Mud daubers, cicada killers, and the dozens of other ground nesting and tunnel nesting species that most people encounter in yards are all solitary. They build individual nests without colonies. They have no queen to defend, no workers to mobilize, no collective defense response. A cicada killer, a large, alarming-looking wasp that hunts cicadas in late summer, is essentially impossible to provoke into stinging unless you physically grab it. The males of this species, which patrol territory aggressively and will hover at head height near anyone who walks through their area, have no stinger at all. The entire performance is bluff. The specific pest control numbers from that UCL/University of East Anglia review are worth stating directly. Insect predation as biological control is estimated to be worth at least $416 billion annually to global agriculture. The review notes that this figure almost entirely overlooks wasp predation. A companion study conducted by the same research group in Brazil introduced social paper wasps to fields of maize and sugarcane infested with fall armyworm and sugarcane borer, two of the most economically damaging agricultural pests in the Americas. Wasp presence measurably reduced pest populations and reduced plant damage compared to control plots without wasps. The lead researcher described wasps as a potentially cheap, accessible form of pest control that uses local species with minimal environmental disruption. So through spring and summer, what's happening is this. The colony is growing, hunting insects constantly, and feeding larvae that will eventually become workers or new queens. The adults are visiting flowers. The numbers are building steadily toward what what will be the colony's peak population in late August, and then late summer arrives and something changes. This is where the autumn wasp behavior comes from, and it's the thing most people never understand. The queen stops laying eggs, not because she's declining, because the colony has shifted its function. The colony's reproductive purpose for the year is nearly complete. New queens have been produced, and they've mated and are ready to disperse to overwinter somewhere sheltered. The founding queen and the workers will all die before winter. Only those newly mated queens will survive, each one carrying fertilized eggs that she'll use to start an entirely new colony from scratch the following spring. When the queen stops producing larvae, the larvae stop producing the nutritious liquid the adult workers have been drinking all season. That food source disappears. At the same time, the colony is at maximum population. Thousands of workers who are now simultaneously underfed and purposeless. Their entire role of caring for young, expanding the nest, and feeding the queen has ended. There are no more larvae to raise. There is no food source inside the nest, and the weather is turning. These workers are starving, and they are searching for sugar wherever they can find it. Your picnic, your open soda can, your overripe fruit, the trash can near the park bench. They are not being aggressive for the sake of aggression. They are desperate, and they are dying, and every one of them is eating whatever it can before it's gone. There's one more thing about autumn wasp behavior worth knowing. When a yellow jacket worker dies or is killed, it releases that same alarm pheromone we talked about at the beginning. In spring and early summer, when the colony is small and food is abundant, the workers are calmer and less likely to be triggered by that signal. In late summer, with the colony at maximum size, food scarce, and every worker already running on low resources, that same alarm signal propagates through a much larger, much more agitated population. The response is faster, more intense, and harder to escape. This is why the same action that produced a minor confrontation in June produces a genuine emergency in September. This is the wasp at your picnic. It's in the last weeks of its life. The colony it came from will be dead by the first frost. The queen it served is already gone to find shelter somewhere under bark or in a wall void. The nest, built from scratch last spring by a single founding queen chewing wood fiber alone, will be abandoned and will slowly decompose over winter. It will never be reused. Next spring, if a new queen finds the same conditions, she will build an entirely new one from scratch. Understanding this doesn't make the sting hurt less, but it does change what the animal is and what it represents. The wasp that's been diving at your drink all afternoon is not an enemy. It is a dying forager from a collapsing colony, running on fumes, doing exactly what every starving animal does. And for most of the season, long before it found your picnic, it was doing something else entirely. The venom of that wasp has been part of medical research for decades. The primary pain-causing compound in wasp venom, the one responsible for the burning sensation, is a peptide called mastoparin. Mastoparin works by disrupting cell membranes. In the context of a sting, this is what causes the immediate local pain and swelling. But researchers studying cell membrane disruption as a mechanism notice something. Cancer cells have membrane properties that differ from healthy cells. They have a higher proportion of negatively charged phospholipids on their outer surface, which makes them more susceptible to the kind of disruption mastoparin produces. Studies published in journals including Toxins, the International Journal of Biological Sciences, and Polymers have documented mastoparin peptides from various wasp species showing cytotoxic activity against multiple cancer cell lines, including human breast cancer cells, liver carcinoma, melanoma, and neuroblastoma cells. The same peptide family has been studied for antimicrobial properties against drug-resistant bacterial strains, with some mastoparins showing activity against organisms that standard antibiotics no longer affect effectively. A 2024 review in the Protein Journal described wasp venom as a promising and underexplored source of antimicrobial peptides, particularly given the global crisis of antibiotic resistance. A wasp venom library compiled by researchers for one 2023 study contained 55 mastoparin variants collected from 31 different wasp species. Of those, 4 were identified as strong candidates for drug development. Antimicrobial compounds with low risk risk of damaging healthy cells. None of this would be in a drug development pipeline at all if anyone had stopped to think of wasp venom as a problem to be eliminated rather than a chemistry set to be studied. None of this means wasp stings treat cancer. The peptides require significant modification and development to be useful as clinical agents, and the research is still at relatively early stages. But the venom of the animal people are swatting away at summer picnics contains compounds that pharmaceutical researchers are actively studying as potential treatments for diseases that kill millions of people annually. That is not a small thing, and none of it will matter if the insects carrying that chemistry disappear. Wasp populations face the same pressures driving declines across other insect groups: habitat loss, pesticide use, climate disruption of the seasonal timing their colonies depend on. The UCL/University of East Anglia review explicitly calls for wasp conservation alongside bee conservation, not as a charity position, but as a practical response to documented ecological and economic value. An insect providing billions of dollars in annual pest control, visiting nearly 1,000 plant species as a pollinator, and carrying venom compounds currently under active pharmaceutical investigation is not a candidate for enthusiastic elimination. It's a candidate for better understanding. Okay, now let's go back to what you should do if you encounter wasps. I already covered 4 things you need to do earlier in the video. Let's talk about the 5th thing. And this isn't really an instruction, rather it's a question you should ask yourself. Where is the nest and who uses that space? A paper wasp nest under the eave of your porch, out of the main traffic path, not near a doorway or a children's play area, should be left alone through the season. Paper wasps will not proactively defend territory at a distance. The workers from that nest are hunting caterpillars and aphids in your garden all summer. They are visiting your flowers. They are doing what they do, and the nest will be gone by November on its own. A seasonal coexistence with a paper wasp nest in a low-traffic location costs you almost nothing and provides genuine pest control value in return. A yellow jacket nest in the ground near a path you walk every day, near a door people use regularly, or anywhere children play is a different situation entirely. Yellow jackets will defend a ground nest aggressively if the area is frequently disturbed and they cannot reliably tell the difference between someone approaching with intent and someone passing by innocently. That nest should be addressed at night with appropriate protective gear, using a foam or dust product applied directly to the entrance rather than a spray that kills foragers far from the source. The distinction is not wasps bad, treat all nests. The distinction is location and species. A nest that poses no realistic threat to how you use your space deserves to complete its season. A nest that makes part of your property impossible to use safely doesn't. Knowing which is which, paper wasp or yellow jacket, high traffic zone or low traffic zone, is the only decision framework you actually need. The wasp hovering near your plate this summer is either the most benign insect in your yard, doing nothing of concern, or the last survivor of a dying colony looking for its final meal, or somewhere in the vast middle ground between those two. What it almost certainly isn't is a random, purposeless enemy that exists to make your summer unpleasant. It has been hunting insects in your garden for months. Its venom is being studied in cancer research. Its nest is built from an engineering material that architects have spent decades trying to replicate, and it will be gone before the leaves turn. If you've had a wasp encounter, please share your experience down in the comments, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks so much, and I'll see you on the next one.